Hello everyone, here today to talk about the market revolution, which is the last half of chapter 14. We talked about immigration at length for about 2 days or so. So now we're going to do a little focusing on, like I said, that last half of chapter 14. Okay, so pages 297 to 318. Alright, so let's get started. So we look at early America, and we look at America in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s. One of the things we have to know is that the economy was very different. Okay, there was a lot of subsistence, which means that people produced what they needed in their local areas. There wasn't a lot of trade going on with other parts of the nation. Okay, everyone was still kind of really isolated. And one of the reasons for that was that transportation was horrible back then. There were no roads, and if there were roads, they were typically made of dirt. There were a lot of canals. There weren't a lot of canals, excuse me. So it was very difficult to connect the East Coast to the West. Okay, there weren't a lot of railroads, stuff like that, and so as a result, transportation was very difficult and really expensive. Okay, there's a great stat I want you to remember. Back then, it cost moving goods 30 miles across land. That costs as much as taking goods and sending them all the way over to Europe. Okay, so 30 miles of transportation over land in America was the same cost as shipping things, several thousand miles away to Europe. Okay, and because there was really bad transportation, there was no incentive for manufacturers or farmers to produce more, because transportation was so expensive that it didn't make sense, okay, to produce more. And so as a result, people just produced what was needed, okay, for their areas. Okay, so for their local areas, that's what they would produce for. Okay, so in other words, we weren't being as productive as we could be. And so transportation, improvements in transportation, new technologies in transportation are needed for our country to take that important step forward and becoming more productive and increasing the standard of living. Okay, and so all these new things in transportation really help us out. Okay, so what we see happening early on, okay, in those 1800s is that several states make the important push to improve transportation. Okay, the federal government really doesn't get involved in improving infrastructure. Okay, they don't build a lot of the roads. They don't focus on many of the canals. In fact, one of the biggest canals that we know are built is the Erie Canal. That was built, and let me show you the Erie Canal here. The Erie Canal was actually built by the state of New York. And if you look at the Erie Canal here, you'll see that it basically, what it does, and this is a very important thing, it basically connects the Great Lakes. Okay, so it started right here, and then it basically comes all the way here through New York, and you can get to the Hudson River here, take the Hudson River, and get to the Atlantic Ocean. And so the Erie Canal connects the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean, which is super important. Okay, and so that was actually funded by the state of New York. And so by funding this canal, you basically give everyone access to trading. Okay, because now you might have been a farmer back in the day here in New York, but what incentive would you have to make more crops? Because who are you going to trade it with? You live in the middle of nowhere. But now that you have this canal, you can put the crops on a ship in the canal, and you can then go and sell your crops down here to good old New York City and help feed all those immigrants that are piling in there and all those people that are starting to work in the factories. Okay, so that's really important. Okay, so we see canals being built, we see roads being built, railroads are also being built, but the roads and the canals are super huge. The steamships are also an important piece of technology. The steamships allow you to go upriver. For the steamship, what you would do is all rivers flow downwards. You would have to, and Abraham Lincoln actually did this. You would get on like what's called a flat ship, and you would load up all your produce or your goods in this flat ship, and then you would kind of just go downstream to wherever port you were going to, typically like New Orleans or something like that. And then once you had gotten all the way to New Orleans, you would unload all your goods, and then you would basically sell your flat ship as firewood, and then you would try to hitch a ride from New Orleans back up north to wherever you're from, and that's how you would have to get your ships to market. But that wasn't a very efficient way of doing this. But having steamships, really transformed trade on rivers and stuff like that. In fact, the price of transportation dropped 90% with the advance of steamships and canals and stuff like that. So those are very important innovations back then. Okay, so here's some pictures of some of the first roads. So here's one of the first turnpikes. Turnpikes were actually private roads that were built by corporations and stuff like that. If you wanted to use them, you'd have to pay them for it. Here's one of the first national roads, the Cumberland Road. So this was actually financed by the federal government, and it basically connected Maryland to St. Louis. So it's a great way for people to expand west and use it for trade. Like I said, the Erie Canal was incredibly important. Here's a picture of what it would look like. It took a long time to build. The History Channel, The Story of Us, has a fantastic little documentary on how the canal was built. Okay, so here's some other canals you're going to notice that basically, once again, what are they doing? They're connecting important waterways. The Erie Canal connects Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. Some of the other canals, the Ohio Canal, the Wabash Canal and stuff like that, they connect the Great Lakes with the Mississippi and stuff like that. So, all these canals are going to encourage trade, allow people to produce more stuff, and get more goods to other markets. Okay, so that's also very important stuff. Railroads start to become super important in this period as well. You'll notice that the railroads, though, in the north, there's a lot more of them, okay, which is going to imply that there's more trade going on. Not so many railroads in the south, okay. You see there's a couple little ones, but there's a ton of trade going on in the north, and you can see that as a result there's going to be a lot more railroads. Okay. Also, what we see happening during this period of time is we see a lot more technological breakthroughs that are just going to make people more efficient, and it's going to allow them to produce more goods. Okay, and so American resourcefulness really picks up during this period of time. An example of this is in 1800. There's 41 patents approved. So patents are basically, if you have an invention, you can go get a patent, and only you can produce it, and you can make money off it. So only 41 are produced in 1800. But by 1860 it's in 4,000. So you can see that America is really becoming more innovative and really producing things. In fact, there's a great quote that says, anything new is quickly introduced here, including all the latest inventions. There is no clinging to the old ways. The moment an American hears the word invention, he pricks up his ears. So it's obviously very important. Some of the examples of technological innovations, I don't have them all listed here, but these are just all things that are going to, either make America more productive or make America more efficient. Okay, so Eli Whitney, he's an incredibly important industrialist back then. He designs the cotton gin. Now, to pick cotton, it takes a super long time. In fact, it would take like one slave an entire day to do to basically pick 1 pound of cotton, and the cotton gin is going to make that slave that much more efficient. Now, unfortunately, the cotton gin, I guess for the South, fortunately, it does make cotton a very profitable cash crop for the first time. But unfortunately, it basically breathes new life into slavery. Okay, slavery was kind of on the downturn, but with cotton, the cotton gin, it basically makes cotton so profitable that it makes slavery really super important again. Eli Whitney also develops a gun factory that makes basically rifles and stuff like that. Cyrus McCormick, he makes a mechanical reaper, which allows farmers to more efficiently harvest their crop and allow them to be able to produce more. We also have some pretty important communication breakthroughs at this time. You have Samuel Morse's telegraph, which vastly improves the speed of communication. And you also have Cyrus Field's transatlantic cable, which took a year to lay, but they were able to actually connect in the 1850s. They were able to connect North America to Europe. And that is fascinating to me, that for the first time they could communicate. And if you just focus on these last two breakthroughs, think about how much that must have changed their world. I mean, we live in a world where, we've seen a lot of really cool technologies come online and stuff like that. Like for me, for instance, when I was a kid, when I was your age, there really wasn't a lot of internet out there. There weren't cell phones and stuff like that. And, those are obviously really big innovations. But the bottom line is that cell phones are great, but we had phones. But check this out. I mean, they didn't have the ability to communicate very quickly back then. If you wanted to communicate with someone, you'd have to write them a letter and mail it, and that would take days, if not months, to get to the destination. And all of a sudden, these two pieces of technology, the telegraph, the transatlantic cable, if you think about just like the War of 1812, for instance, we know that that war started because of slow communication, and Cyrus Field basically takes a relationship with the Europeans and the Americans where it takes them forever to talk to one another. This transatlantic cable means they can have pretty much simultaneous conversations with one another now. And the spread of information is just going to skyrocket because of these inventions. So super important things going on here. Okay. We also see during this time, we see a pro-business culture popping up during this time. We see the Supreme Court, either intentionally or unintentionally aiding this pro-business culture, making it easier for businesses to compete in this nation, protecting the rights of businesses and stuff like that. We see a very laissez-faire attitude as well, where the government is very pro-business. The government does a lot of things to kind of help governments develop. Okay. We also see important people like Samuel Slater, who's an immigrant who basically comes to this country and basically becomes the father of the factory system. He actually memorized the spinning machine, which was basically used in textiles, making clothing and stuff like that. He actually had to sneak himself into America. America was actually paying bounties to get European industrialists to come to America to help industrialize. So basically he disguised himself as a farmer. And when he gets to America, he designs the first spinning machine. And from there, the American textile industry begins to grow as a result of Samuel Slater. And so we start to see textile factories popping up within New England and also other parts of the country. But basically New England is pretty huge. Like Massachusetts is kind of the center there for textile industry in 1840. But you can see that there's textiles everywhere. Okay, and because of the improvement in transportation, these textiles, these clothes can now be traded with other parts of the country much more efficiently. Okay, so here you can see just how many people are working in some of these areas. So the largest circle represents 3,000 employees. So basically you're starting to see, you're starting to see that more and more people are working in the textile industry. Okay, also with this kind of these beginnings of industrial revolution, we start to see workers start to demand more rights. We also see the start of the labor movement within the United States. There's a political party known as the Working Men's Party. They called themselves Workies. They began to basically push for more rights for workers. You also have the Supreme Court and the Commonwealth vs. Hunt legitimized labor unions. So from early on, these early levels of industrialization, we start to see the labor movement start to pick up. Okay. We also see, as a result of industrialization picking up, we see cities starting to grow. So in 1820, you can kind of see based on how big those little color-coded circles are, how big cities are. And we only have one city in 1820 that has a population of 100,000 to 250,000. To put that in perspective, Milwaukee right now is around 600,000. Okay, so now that we have improved transportation, now that we have more markets for our industry, okay, and we have the ability to feed those big cities because of the farmers that have more markets to sell their crops to, we're going to see the cities start to grow in the following decades here. So by 1860, look at how big the cities have become. Okay, industry is picking up. Okay, like I said, we're producing more and more stuff because we have this improved transportation. Okay, so let's look at the added colors here. Going back to 1820, the biggest city we had was in the 100,000 to 250,000 person range. Okay, and here we see new categories. We see 500,000 to 1 million, 250,000 to 500,000. Okay, so we basically see these huge cities being formed. New York, Philadelphia become ginormous cities. Okay, you also start to be noticing here as we're gearing up for the Civil War here that our biggest cities are located pretty much all in the north. Okay, really, in fact, the only cities, and that's awesome. Sorry about that. Fix that here. Our biggest cities are all located in the north, and really the only cities the South has, aren't that big. The biggest city in the South is going to be New Orleans. That's going to be in the 100,000 to 250,000 person range. The rest of their cities are all pretty small. With only 2 cities or 3 cities in the South that are between 25,000 and 50,000. Okay, so when the war starts, think about just the big disadvantage they're going to have with industry and stuff like that. Okay. Also, we start to see the American workforce begins to change during this market revolution, during this industrial revolution that is starting. We see more and more people leaving agriculture. So you see in 1820 it's at 78%, and by 1860 it's down to 52%. So farming is becoming more efficient, and people are now moving from the rural areas into those cities to become those factory workers. You can see the increase in manufacturing jobs as well. So I guess kind of summing this up, we started by talking about transportation, okay? And we have to recognize how important transportation was. The lack of transportation in our country back then really kind of handcuffed us, okay? It didn't allow people to be as productive as they could be, okay? They couldn't grow more crops because what was the point? Who are you going to sell those crops to? If you're a farmer in Wisconsin or Illinois back then, okay, and you live in a little town of, 150 people, 250 people, and, the nearest city is, 1,000 miles away, what's the point of growing as much as you can? There's no need to, okay? So basically you're going to grow the crops your family needs to eat. You're going to grow some extra crops so that you can trade some of your crops to get shoes, to get maybe some animals, to get some clothes, to get some form of entertainment, and you're gonna use those crops to barter. Once we have technology, though, once we have this transportation technology and the ability to move crops and other goods away, now we're going to see people growing as much as they can, okay, and then trading it to other markets, essentially, which is why it's called the market revolution, because there's now these markets to sell more stuff to. Farmers can sell their, farmers in Wisconsin can now sell their crops to Chicago or New York or Philadelphia, these big giant cities that need to feed all these new people that are working in these factories. Now these factories can then sell like the reaper to the farmers in Wisconsin, and they can sell plows to Wisconsin, the plows that John Deere made, for instance. And so things really start to change as a result. Okay, we see this idea that households used to be self-sufficient, now they're not. Okay, now people are going to work to make money to buy the goods they need, whereas before that wasn't the case. That's not how things worked. Okay, so that's obviously very important. Okay, we also see regional trade picking up, like I kind of just mentioned. You see trade between west and north and south and all that kind of good stuff. We also see the regions of this country start to specialize. Okay, the north, as the map indicated before, are basically growing. The cities are growing in the north. There's industry in the north. The west is basically becoming farmers. Okay, lots and lots of farmers. They're making a lot of crops. And that's still kind of true today. If you look at the Midwest, a lot of farms there. The South is basically sticking with their cash crops, specifically cotton, tobacco, rice, indigo, stuff like that. Okay. So, anyways, that's the market revolution. Make sure that you kind of get the idea that having that transportation, like just one off, how awesome is that? Having those improvements in transportation allow us to be more productive people and allow us to grow in industry. Okay. So, anyways, have a great day. I will see you soon.